It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and thank you for joining us on What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems and have the great pleasure of working with employers all over the world on HR, workplace culture, and DEI strategies. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you? You're back in town.
I'm back. It feels like I've been gone forever. It's only been a little over a week, but it's been. I
was with you for part of the away, right? But then I'm like, you were away, and I'm like, now
it's like
back.
this whole thing from like Color Purple. But
totally. I was like all weekend. Oh, I wonder what. Never mind, she's not here.
Yeah. It was a good weekend though. Had fun in DC and then in Atlanta. So good times with good people.
Yeah, it's always important.
Yeah.
Well, today's topic feels awfully timely. I feel like every headline that we talk about, we see lately is about some kind of conflict. But, today we want to get into how do we prevent conflict before it starts, right? On your teams and one-on-one situations amongst leaders, right? We've seen it from every angle. We see it from every angle on a daily basis.
Right.
And I think, the first thing, and I'm going to punt it over to you because I just feel like you talk about this so well, but I think folks look at conflict as a negative, right?
Yeah.
And so talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, people put a judgment on conflict. They make it a bad thing because it's uncomfortable, which, it makes sense, right? Like you're having to have a conversation with someone that feels a little icky or could potentially feel icky. That's how you relate to it, right? So because of that, people often don't want to offend. They don't want to hurt. They don't want to cause harm. And I think sometimes these conflicts, or these conversations that might be a little tough, if there's any sort of conflict, can feel that way. But they don't necessarily have to be that. Sometimes, sure, you might have to let somebody have it. But for the most part...
Oh my God, you said that on another episode. I feel like deja vu. We're going to have to do one of that, like throw it in there.
Yeah.
But I also I just think conflict is inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think you're going to agree with people 100% of the time, like that's a lie, right? And if you think that there's never going to be a point at which you are needing to speak about that disagreement, it's also like a farce. But when we're saying, so to be clear, conflict is not necessarily good or bad. It's just a fact of life. But when we're saying, well, let's prevent conflict before it happens, what does that mean? Because that sounds contradictory to conflict isn't bad, right?
Right. Yeah, it could be taken that way, sure. I think when we say that, it's more of let's kind of try to nip it in the bud before it gets to a head, like before it gets really, really contentious, or to the point where there's like no return, where the relationship is completely damaged, the bridges are burned, like all of that. Let's see if we can be a little bit more tuned to what's happening, what the energy is, and really speak to it, give voice to it ahead of time before it gets really, really bad. So not necessarily to avoid it, but to just catch it at a place where it's manageable. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what we are hoping. Like, I think when we look at the type of work we do, that's what we are always like, dang, that was avoidable. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We see this in workplace culture assessments. Of course, we see it in investigations all the time where it's like something festers. Mm-hmm. It starts off manageable. Right. Maybe we don't agree about something and we could have talked about it. We could have handled it, but we let it fester. For all the reasons that you talk about, right? The discomfort of dealing with it. And then it turns into, sheesh, maybe you're preventing like workplace war before it happens, right? Because then it turns into things that require so many more interventions to untangle because it wasn't dealt with when it was a small conflict, right? It's coming to a head when it's like this big, huge conflict.
Right.
So if we think about like today, like the things that we want to make sure we cover, we want to unpack what conflict costs an organization, right? Because we're talking to leaders and this does come at $1 somehow. Why you shouldn't fall apart when people give you feedback, right? Like someone giving you feedback is not a threat.
Right.
And then how do you develop teams that disagree well? So let's start with the money, because that's pretty straightforward. I feel like you have some stats there on like what it costs.
Yeah, we have a stat here that says that according to the CPP Inc., the average U.S. employee spends about 2.8 hours a week dealing with conflict.
Wow.
2.8 hours a week, which adds up to about 359 billion with a B in lost productivity annually. And so that's a big number to have to deal with people not like beefing a little bit, right? Like not really getting along, or something's come up and someone found offense to whatever, like things that actually that you can address. But 2.8 hours out of your week are just dealt with kind of navigating these kind of tricky spaces. So it's a lot, and it gets expensive, but it's avoidable.
Well, and here's the thing about that number. That only deals with the person hours lost because of conflict, right? So those are the dollars attributable to people not doing the job they were paid to do. But that doesn't get at the emotional toll it takes.
Facts.
And the long-term impact that emotional toll has on the way in which your employees show up to work, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because there was I think another episode that we did that talked about like stress, what happens with stress and how that impacts productivity, how it can lead to burnout, disengagement, people not actually giving their best, showing up as their best selves at work. And so, it's a thing where the cost, to your point, isn't just tangible, that number value, but there's an emotional and energetic cost to it too. That, I mean, gosh, what do you think that number is then if you factor that in? Ha.
The therapy hours, the extra spa days, the PTO days, the sick days, right? Like all of these things where, of course, those benefits are, people should be using those types of benefits, but not because they're so stressed out about beefing with the co-worker at work, right? Like, so, I think it's like, again, one of these very practical things that we talk about a lot of, do you really want people to be suffering at work when you're paying them to do a job? And I think most leaders would say no,
Right.
But it means that there needs to be work done to help avoid that. So
Right.
how do inclusive leaders like lean into conflict? Both work, really.
Both. Actually, both.
Lean in and lean
And
in.
lean in. And it's literally those two things. It's leaning in and leading in to the conflict. Leaning in that you're not avoiding it. You're not putting your head in the sand. You're not pretending it'll go away if you ignore it, because that's not going to happen ever. And then the leading in is being proactive about it. It's actually showing up in the place of a leader in whatever it is, and being like, no, we gotta take care of this, and modeling what that looks like, modeling transparency, saying the hard things, holding space for folks so that they can process what they want to do in real time. It's having your own emotional intelligence at play and in check, so that you can really navigate that well. And also admitting, like, I don't know, you don't know what's going on and may not have all the answers, and that's okay too. Like, you all can figure it out, but it is being okay in that space of ambiguity as you work through these things, and folks can struggle with that. So we got to make space for it to be okay for people to stumble a little bit as they build these skills here in inclusive leadership.
Yeah, and I have a really good example of how that goes wrong. So I had an investigation that I'm wrapping up that it's not one Shanté's working on, but she's gotten to hear more about it than she'd like. But the leader at issue, really the complaint about him was he wasn't receptive to feedback. He aggressively cut people off when they tried to share ideas. He sort of did things that people felt was sort of like a public humiliation of them. Like, I think he was trying to be funny, but he's like, oh, I know so-and-so has no idea what you're talking about, so I'll explain, right? Sort of diminishing people in front of others. And, when I interviewed him, I asked him like how he builds psychological safety. First, asking if he understood what it meant, and he understood it well enough. He's like, I'm direct, and I tell people to be direct with me. And I was like, that is so, in my brain, so one-dimensional. Just saying I'm direct, you be direct back, and you're running an organization shows complete lack of self-awareness, right? Like, who's going to just talk to you as a new head of an organization just because you say, tell me? right? Like it's lazy, it's one dimensional, it's not thoughtful of the people in the room, right? And when he was sort of giving some critical feedback of one of the people who was reporting to him, he's like, yeah, I just wanted her to use her voice more and da da da. And when I interviewed her, I'm like, oh, she's an extreme introvert. So I'm like, you're not even taking the time to know your teams, right? So we've got plenty of episodes where we talk to you about how to get to know your teams. And so certainly, we'll drop a few of those when we drop this episode. But the reason why I bring that up is that it brings us back to the place we always have to start, which is self-awareness, right?
100%.
It's great if you're direct and you want people to be direct with you, but that's not the end of the story, just saying it, right?
And it's also very self-centered if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's like, but you're not the only one in this situation. So just because you like, and what does direct even mean? Like, there's so many things that are wrong with that statement. Direct can be, stating the facts and, minimizing emotion, etc. It doesn't mean that you're, excuse my language, an ass about it. Like, you don't have to be really, really harsh when you're giving direct feedback, and you can be mindful of the people that you're giving the feedback to. So I think it's everything that you're saying around what is it, how are you showing up as a leader, and are you really leading? So yeah, no, it's in the psychological
right.
part
And
too.
to be able to lead in and lean in, you have to really be clear with yourself about what conflict brings up for you, right? Like, and so, my sense of this person is he actually doesn't want feedback. Like, he doesn't want people to push back. He wants people to agree with him, like violently agree with me, not violently disagree with me or disagree with me at all. Right. And if that's you, and listen, this is not like a good, bad, right, wrong. It's how do you need to show up to get what you're looking for? Mm-hmm. The way he showed up did not get him what he needed to look for, because it led to a whole investigation of people saying he's bullying and discriminating against women. And like at the end of the day, it's like that was avoidable, right? Mm-hmm. If you didn't have like a one-dimensional way of viewing like discourse in the workplace, now you have conflict you can't get yourself out of because you've completely undermined your trust, the trust anyone could have ever had with you. And now I'm here to understand this conflict, right? Like, because you didn't prevent it. And nobody really wants me to be there when it gets to that point, right? Because now things are cantankerous, usually past the point of no return, right? Mm-hmm. That these folks who reported him would never work with him. If he was staying, he would quit. Like, they would absolutely quit. And it's like, that's ridiculous, right? Because it's not necessary.
It's not. And Gallup has a really good stat here. They say that they found that employees that receive regular feedback are 3.6 times more likely to be engaged than those who don't. So to your point of not, like, don't even get to the point where you got to come in here. If you can give feedback regularly and give it, but have it done well, because part of the conflict and tension where this flares up to the point where you got to get involved is this stuff, it's not delivered well. And it's not delivered in a way that can be received well. And so you really got to be mindful of, as a leader, how you're navigating these conversations, how you're talking to your employees, and how and in a way that they can get it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to be calling us for some investigations. But here,
don't get it twisted. We love a good investigation.
We do.
We just are like, you could do better. And all right. Yeah. So what are some of the warning signs that conflict is right beneath the surface?
It's around that disengagement piece that came up in the Gallup stat. People just stop participating. They stop speaking up. You feel the energy kind of withdraw, right? You feel them pull back out of it. There's no, even in your little, if you're a remote organization, maybe you have Teams or Slack or whatever you use. Maybe engagement there is down. Folks don't really talk to each other. They're very much in their blinders, right? And so people just aren't engaged. They stop wanting to do things. I got feedback recently from a client, a leader in an organization with one of her direct reports. And she was saying that she noticed the shift. She noticed an energetic shift. And she's one of her aces, right? This is someone that she really relies on heavily in terms of like partnership. And noticed that because they've had some challenges around some change initiatives that they had in their organization, and she's noticed a shift in her energy and a pullback. And she asked, is everything okay? And the person said, yeah, and just threw it away. Now, I don't think that was necessarily the right question, but that's a whole other thing. But you feel it. You feel it. And so, that's a clear early warning sign that something is amiss and you want to kind of investigate and interrogate.
I think when you were talking, it makes me think about like relationships with loved ones, right? Like your best friend or your partner or your kids. You can feel when something's not right, right? And I think what tends to be hard about that is that if you are naturally a conflict avoidant person, that becomes an easy point at which you can ostrich, right? Because yeah, I feel it, but I don't want to start a fight. I don't want to, right? And then next thing you know, someone's filing for divorce. If you apply it to the workplace, next thing you know, someone's resigning. And you're like, oh my God, like, can we fix it? And sometimes you might have been able to fix it if you had asked better questions and is everything okay? Because that's such a yes, no, I don't feel like talking to you kind of question. But I think it's that piece of like, if we start off from the baseline, like we said in the beginning of this conversation, that conflict is inevitable. Like it happens. It's just part of life. If you can accept that and work to accept that, then you won't accept the withdrawals, right? Because then you're going to notice like things are off. This is one of my aces, right? This is somebody I really rely on, and I need to understand what's happening so that I can either get out ahead of this or figure out, where we go from here. And so I think if you took away nothing more from this conversation, it's do not avoid the conflict. Because if you're avoiding the conflict with one person, I can guarantee you it's your conflict is with more than one person, and it's just going to proliferate, right? And I think that's what happened in this investigation that I'm talking about. And frankly, what's going on in the situation you're dealing with, right? Overlooking one situation and it just like it spills over, and I do think it stems heavily from a lack of self-awareness.
And when that does spill over, it starts to then impact culture. So it stops being just about the one conversation maybe that could happen. And then it starts to be, you're creating this culture where either feedback isn't welcome or received, or it doesn't happen, or we can't have difficult conversations, courageous conversations, whatever you call them in your organization. And so it shuts it down. It starts to shut it down, and then you start to see that disengagement. And I don't know if anyone really wants to work in that kind of environment. So, but to your point, it does. It's like a bit of a cancer if you don't really address it early on when you sense it. Because again, these are things that we can pick up on. These nonverbals, we can sense when things are off, and we need to really get into it. So, but talk like what in your opinion, what happens if it does get to that point where it's starting to really impact culture?
Well, we've seen it so many times. It sounds like we're entering into another investigation that has the exact same issue, right? A leader who yells and, threatens. And let's just first call it what it is, outdated. Like this idea that you can muscle your way to winning is so outdated. We have talked about this at length, but just to quickly remind us, folks are just not okay, right? We see it every single day. We all do, not just me and you, but I'm saying you can see people, you're like, yo, why are they beeping like crazy and the light just turned red? Are they okay? I mean, right, green, are they okay? Like, why are you yelling at me about like where I'm like people are upset about everything. So if you are silly enough to come crazy at people, then you should make sure you have security that follows you around. And I'm not trying to be facetious. It's like you are playing with your own life by treating people like this is the 1990s. It's not.
Right.
Groceries are really freaking expensive. Rent is expensive. People are squeezed at every single freaking turn, right? So be a decent human being, right? Is part of it. But what happens to the culture is it can be very destructive to an organization. People quiet quit. People spend way more than 2.8 hours talking about how much they hate their jobs, right? So that figure, I think, is probably a low end estimate, right? If you think about not just the actual conflict, but then all the other things that happen, then you go to your work bestie and be like, you know, that MF sent me this email and look how he sent the email. Can you believe he sent an email like this? Right? Like it gets all like high. And so then you have that. The worst case scenario is what I've already heard from the first few witnesses I've interviewed in this new investigation of no one's ever going to come and tell you the truth because everyone's afraid of getting fired. Well, if they're not going to tell me the truth about how they're being treated, are they going to be truthful about how their work is really going? No. They're going to tell you whatever they think you want to hear so they can keep your job. Mm-hmm. So then you're getting fake feedback, right? And then nobody's really telling each other the truth. And that's problematic for, I mean, hopefully a million obvious reasons.
Right.
And then we have the piece around outside of quiet quitting where people just do the bare minimum, they quit. And as we've talked about before, it's really expensive to hire and fire people. Like at a minimum, it's 6 to 9 months of their salary. So it kind of always boggles my mind that companies will kind of like loosely care about attrition, but never really want to deal with like the undercurrent of why people are leaving, especially when it's thematic, right? We have this one toxic rock star leader who talks to us crazy all the time, and we're tired of it, and no one's doing anything about it. And they're like, well, okay, all right. And then it keeps happening. So, I mean, that's the big piece of all of this. And I mean, I know we talk about this in a different way all the time, but it just doesn't make any sense to me that companies that are trying to create shareholder value are still okay with these types of leaders. You get it in engagement survey feedback, exit survey feedback, anonymous complaints, which we've seen a lot more anonymous complaints where people are not even comfortable like revealing themselves when they complain. It's an epidemic.
Yeah. So to avoid that, right, like some shifts need to happen. Organizations need to equip themselves in order to be able to manage conflict when it does arise. I mean, we do trainings on this all the time, courageous conversations, difficult conversations, whatever you want to call them. But what needs to be in place in order to really hold the space for these kinds of conversations?
Well, I think this is a you question. I think a lot about how you respond, which I love your discipline around it when you talk about a community agreements.
Yeah.
And when you are facilitating a conflict, but some of those community agreements are helpful for team dynamics every day, right? The one that comes immediately to mind is assume good intent, right? So that we're not starting off from a charged place. So,
that one is so hard. that one is really, really hard. But it's a big one though, because when you've been dealing with the thing that's been boiling under the surface and you're ready to just lose it on somebody, it's hard to just assume that this person doesn't mean harm or doesn't mean to give you any grief when you're already upset about it. And so it's we say it, and it's always a good one to use to kind of help pull people back. But there's always a little bit of an energetic shift whenever that one comes up.
About that community agreement in the context of everyday work, right?
Sure.
Maybe we won't be getting to a point where people are fed up, right? So meaning if you and I are having something that's not yet a conflict, but we're not agreeing and we're having an issue. If I'm able to say, look, I don't think you're trying to offend me. I assume you have good intent here, but let me just explain how this is showing up for me. Before we even have a Shanté reading off community agreements, I think it can go a long way. I mean, when we've been talking a lot about humanity this year, we need to get back to humanity. Some of it is stop thinking everybody's out to get you, right?
Oh, people take things personally.
They haven't read the 4 agreements.
They haven't read the 4 agreements. They take things personally. They make assumptions, and so it's okay, well. Of course.
So if we think about this, because we have a few more episodes, don't worry. We're going to drag this out a little bit more. Not drag it. That's negative, but we're going to draw it out a little bit more. But if we just look at this first segment, right? It's number 1. Conflict is not a bad thing, right? It's neutral. It's unavoidable in life, right? And every time you try to avoid a conflict, it makes the conflict deeper. Two, it costs a lot of money, right? The estimates that we have from people who study this is upwards of 12 hours a month people spend at work dealing with conflict. So it is beneficial to get some good procedures in to avoid it, or avoid it boiling over to the point of no return. Again, this brings us back to, as a leader, it's really important for you to be self-aware, solicit feedback, offer feedback constructively, right? If you're not sure how to give constructive feedback, ask for help. And then understand that, inclusive leaders lead in and lean in, and really don't avoid the conflict, and understand that if they're not doing that, it can have very destructive impact on your workplace culture that costs way more money than it does to just have some courage and face these issues head on. We appreciate you tuning in. You can find us on wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We're on all your social media channels, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Find us, like, subscribe, tell us what you want to learn about that we haven't talked about, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to What's the Deal, where we break down what it really takes to build accountable, inclusive cultures at work. If you found today's episode helpful, make sure to check out our other videos for more real talk and practical tools on creating workplaces where everyone thrives. We're dropping new content all the time, so don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. That way, you'll be the first to know when fresh episodes go live. Let's keep the conversation and the change going. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.